Hi, LA Progressive friends and family and readers and subscribers. Dick and I are here today with a longtime friend, fellow progressive. He really needs no introduction, but I'm going to ask him to introduce himself. His name is Alan Minsky. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Sharon, and hey, Dick, it's great to join you in this platform. And the degree to which maybe I don't need an introduction for this audience is largely because I was the program director at KPFK Radio in Los Angeles for almost a decade and was there as a producer before that. And actually was one of the co-founders of LA Indie Media going back a ways, but it was really the profile I gained in Southern California through KPFK. And then, really, to my surprise, through all that has gone on in my life related to Pacifica Radio, I did not apply to be the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. I was developing a podcast on the environment with a gentleman who was one of Bernie Sanders' leading environmental counselors in his 2016 campaign. And he had gone through the EEOC process and was asked to be the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. He confided this to me while we were developing the podcast, and he was negotiating the terms of his directorship. And then he surprised me one day and he said he's decided not to take the position and would I consider doing it? And I said, "Oh, I'm so honored you're asking me that, but no, I'm really immersed in the Pacifica battle stuff." And at the time, I was a semifinalist for executive director of Pacifica, though I knew I wouldn't get that. I knew actually that I'd end up being one of the two finalists, but I wouldn't have the votes on the board. But still, I said no to the PDA offer. And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beat Joe Crowley in a primary. And I
Yeah.
called my friend up and I said, "Hey, that job you mentioned, is that still open?" And the answer was, yes, it is. And so I ended up sort of being considered in a vacuum as a candidate. It wasn't just hollow that the friend had asked me to do it. We had been talking, and at the time, Jeremy Corbyn was in charge of the Labor Party, and the first Bernie Sanders campaign had happened. My father was a prominent progressive economist. I'm very networked with global progressive economists, progressive economists around the world. And so I was interested in maybe starting a kind of think tank, if my time at Pacifica ended, which would be there to support the economic policies of a Corbyn prime ministership, of a Bernie Sanders presidency. Because, in terms of getting the economic policies and social policies that we want, that we understand that society needs, just getting elected isn't that much. The barriers, the hurdles are still going to be there. And in particular, the hurdles of explaining to the world that what they've been told about the economy and neoliberalism is really a bunch of misinformation over the last 4 decades. And we would have to be there. So I told him that, and I explained to him all the connections I had and why that wouldn't just be a hollow aspiration to pursue such a think tank. So he asked me to do the job. And then when I was considered for it, I was so honored to be given the position because I knew Tim Carpenter, the founding executive director. I'd been to a few PDA retreats. I knew that they were the political organization, the sole political organization to have drafted Bernie Sanders to run for president until about 8 months after they started. National Nurses United joined them in the effort to draft Bernie to run as a Democrat, and that had changed American political history for the better.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you haven't quite, I'm going to let Dick jump in here, but I just want to say that you haven't quite mentioned that you are the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. So
Right.
just wanted to
Hinted
slip
at it,
that
but
in.
yeah.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted,
Thank you.
some part of our audience won't know what the Progressive Democrats of America are and in particular, what impact they're having right now and what you guys are working on right now.
Well, to go back a ways, when they were started in 2004, it was very conspicuously done because the Ralph Nader campaign had not been inside the Democratic Party in 2000. And I think correctly, the founding executive director and the founding political director and the other people who founded it, including people like Lila Garrett and Mimi Kennedy, who are here in Southern California. Um, you look, we live, this is the term, the two-party system was sort of understood and used when I was a kid growing up. And it's sort of fallen out of parlance because I think everybody sort of objects to it as part of the landscape of American politics. But it's as deeply entrenched as ever. And to not fight inside the Democratic Party, because fighting inside the Republican Party, that's whatever, that's absurd at this point. If we want to see the government, which is still the most powerful organizing force in our society, work for the benefit of the people, you have to work inside the Democratic Party. There's been one person elected to any federal office since 1946 who was a member of a party other than the Democrats and the Republicans. And it was to the Conservative Party in New York State in 1971 in the Senate. And New York State has fusion party tickets. The Conservatives broke with the Republicans, because the liberal Republican ran, that split the liberal vote. The Conservatives won. No member of the House of Representatives is from a third party. So PDA is an organization that fights the good fight inside the Democratic Party, unequivocally, unapologetically left progressive, and the best, whether it's Democratic Socialist, Social Democratic, or FDR New Deal, MLK progressive politics. That is what we're about inside the party, and we fight on every issue across the board. In 2024, right now, obviously from the moment of a few days after October 7th, we had a radical break with the Biden administration position on Israel Gaza, for instance. And we were not, we didn't, hold our tongue or bite our lip about that. And we are, unabashedly for Medicare for all. We're not involved in the, apologias and celebrations of the ACA, though, of course, it's better than nothing. It's still our tax dollars going to private insurance companies. Why are they even there? I mean, they're entirely parasitic institutions. We
Yeah.
should single payer universal health care. We should have free public colleges and universities, and affordable housing as a human right. So across the board, where we are a very different political formation, and if we weren't inside a two-party system, as I think AOC said back when Biden was running, Joe Biden and I wouldn't be in the same political party. We have a
That's
two-party
right.
system, so we are. And right now, we also have to defeat what is, I think proto can drop away from the fascist label for Trump these days. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
real threat to the democracy here. Yeah.
So, there are people who will claim that if you are a Democrat, you're a progressive. So the LA Progressive talks to lots of different people that
Right.
we would consider moderates. I like to make a distinction between liberal and progressive. So I'm always trying to be clear. When we say we also say we are unapologetically progressive. And I
Right.
try to be clear, well, what is the distinction between a progressive and a liberal? And how would you characterize the distinction between a progressive and a liberal?
Well, there's a very good designation that I saw in a book that's somewhat controversial, and I don't necessarily want to go into the content of the book, but it was a political philosopher, and I can't remember her name, but I remember the name of the book. And again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of this subject. The book is called Woke is Not Left, or Left is Not Woke. And in the book, the American political philosopher who lives in Germany does this distinction between a liberal and a progressive, or rather a liberal and the left. And there's three positions that they overlap on, but the break comes with essentially the UN Declaration for Human Rights, all of the economic measures. Are these, and I forget the liberal term they use, are these things that you sort of need to earn to have, like healthcare, housing, et cetera, or are they birthrights and you're right by being a human being at birth to have universal healthcare, universal housing, a living wage available in a job, that those need to be also a part of the package. And that's the distinction between, because in open society, of course, we support the idea of progress as a possibility is something that we support, as opposed to there are some variants of radicalism that claim that there has been no progress on places where I do believe there's been progress. Not, usually on those instances, not enough, and therefore the wedge to claim that there's been no progress, but that progress is a possibility. But I can't remember the three founding principles that are shared by liberals and progressives as she outlines them. But that's the distinction, is that the economic Bill of Rights is included along with the not just social, but also, rights of free speech, et cetera, type of things.
Right, the Bill of Rights.
So you mentioned that we progressives need to work within the Democratic Party at this point, especially around the presidential election. We have to somehow unite behind Joe Biden. And yet right now, Joe Biden is saying the words of caution to Netanyahu at the same time he ships billions of dollars of more weapons that killed many thousands of Palestinians. And it's coming back to bite him in a big way, in protests filling the street, a little like what happened in Vietnam. How do you think we work our way out of this?
Well, we don't actually. If the invasion of um, Rafah occurs, right, and Biden doesn't stop the weapons, I mean, I don't know what to say. He'll lose the election. He deserves to lose the election. I mean, at a certain point, human lives have to be viewed as sacred,
Right.
and to go along with a slaughter like that. I mean, look, Trump. We have all grown up inside a society in the United States where we, first of all, I think if you have a sophisticated and accurate analysis of our political system, it is a perverted democracy, particularly by the power of money.
Yeah.
Right. And there are other barriers of entrenchment. Those are not undifferent than you see elsewhere. The power of money is really the massive, distinctive, distorting force that makes it so problematic in the United States right now to wind our way back to an honest democracy. And I also, by the way, believe that Trump, and I'll get back to Gaza in a second. I'm not going to script that question. Um, the um, the Trump phenomenon I see is fundamentally rooted as an outgrowth of the neoliberal era. When you get this level of wealth inequality, and you have all this, not just wealth, but political power concentrated in the hands of the few, well, they don't want us damn proles interfering with the process of them deciding what they're going to do with their world. So they have no use for democracy anymore. And that's where we've arrived. And Trump is, I mean, they're riding him as their useful idiot. I mean, I think Trump is fine with all of that, but he's also obviously a erratic psychological character and all of the things that Donald Trump is, and a very dangerous person, even, almost even like more so. I mean, who knows? His incompetence might actually be beneficial, suppose, say, compared to like Mussolini, who was less incompetent and therefore maybe even more threatening, right? But anyway, he's the guy in our context. He's a serious danger. I see it as an outgrowth of that disparity. Okay, so if we're in a situation where this kind of crime against humanity is blessed by the sitting Democratic administration, it's a horror show. And so I do think the uncommitted vote in Michigan forced something of a change in the Biden administration. Now, we can't know what the thinking was behind the scenes between Blinken and Biden and what was going on, but the fact that it roughly was immediately after, that you started to see the rhetorical shift, I think we're at a point where what Biden has forced is for Netanyahu now to be the one who's primarily gaslighting, because he's telling his people, we're going to invade Rafah. Is he going to invade Rafah when the United States is going to say we're going to cut off arms if you invade Rafah? And we'll see. So right there's a distinction even between Biden and Trump. That doesn't forgive. What are horrible, horrible things? Terrible. I mean, this was a horror show and a set of crimes against the people of Gaza that were parallel to anything we've witnessed in our lives. And that the United States went along with it is something that's going to be, something that's going to be on Joe Biden's record for eternity. And it's really unforgivable because of the level of human slaughter. But we're in the situation where we have to protect our democracy. And we also, I think it really foregrounds something that I've been trying to lean into as the executive director of Progressive Democrats, and PDA as an organization that has deep roots in, is that when we announce ourselves to the world as a political formation, we have to remember to highlight foreign policy as well. We have to highlight that the United States, under the progressivism that we share and that we want, has to include a recasting of U.S. foreign policy so that it is honestly aligned with absolutely making the human rights of all peoples, right? The civil rights, human rights, rights of self-determination, the rights of land for people who, obviously were on land or being forced out, like in this instance in Israel and Palestine. That has to be who we align ourselves with, not with business interests primarily, but with the interests of human beings, with the rights of labor, and the rights for self-determination, civil rights, and human rights of all people. That hasn't been the case in the United States, and we have to take this moment and demand that as the Democratic Party reforms itself after the Biden years, that the progressives are demanding that, along with a new economic deal for the American public, and a new civil rights and social rights deal too, as well, for the American public. Because who are the progressives? The progressives have to be the political formation that does not accept, as part of the wallpaper of our society, all of this human tragedy, all of these endemic problems that exist in our society. And there's enough wealth here that we can transform the society into a low to no income society with a prosperous middle class, one that has a vibrant democracy and is not ruled by the economic elite. but foreign policy has to be constitutive of that. So look, if there's a reversion and he doesn't continue getting better and better on Israel and Gaza, I mean, for one thing, his election's going to be in peril. And we're not going to really, I don't know what we do. We're in a real double bind. But if it does keep getting better, then it's an easier path to do what we have to do, which is defeat Donald Trump. And if Joe Biden makes it impossible for us to work with, a clear conscience to do that, for me, that's just shame on him. And the chips will fall where they may, which is tragic to say. But I think we're going to win this. I think we're going to hold him to what he has to be. I mean, Nancy Pelosi even came out and said no weapons and a ceasefire. There's been movement. And by the way, also, lastly, got to say it, boy, did the squad get it right. October 16th, 9 days after the 7th, calling for a ceasefire. They should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
So while we talk about neoliberalism being a problem and the sort of the new version of the corporatists taking over, kind of a lot of people started in 1971 with the Powell memo, I've always believed that the ground was fertile here in the United States for those seeds to be planted. And what we as progressives have to do is not just look at the outcome, not just look at the fruit of those seeds that were planted, but we need to look at the fertile ground. And that fertile ground, we can own that fertile ground as progressives if we had progressive media. Because what's happening with Trump and Biden, yeah, well, we've let this stuff go too far. It shouldn't have even gotten this far. If we had media that addressed and that people read, if corporate media, the corporations didn't own the media, I doubt that we'd be in the position that we're in.
Well, I agree with that for sure. And there's been a lot that's happened in our society with the degradation of classical media, 20th century media. And I do think, for instance, the complete collapse of local journalism has really created a disconnect between what people hear in media that's just about the nation and this relationship to their own lives. It all seems very distant at the national level. It buys into this. There are real problems, by the way. There are huge structural problems, I think, with the moderate Democrats as a political formation and the way that they present themselves as the better alternatives to the Republicans, and progressives be damned because they're going to have to vote for us because there's no alternative.
Yeah, but don't you think that the media helps to facilitate that way of thinking? I mean, absolutely. The media doesn't even really challenge it.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, I think, when it comes to the sort of cultural signifiers between the representation of responsible voices in corporate media and the Democratic Party establishment and how working people look out upon that, I think it's very alienating to working class people. Just the other day, Bhaskar Sankara from The Nation was involved in reporting on a study that was done, and of Democratic Party candidates, less than 3% were from the working class in the 2022 election cycle.
Yeah.
So to take us in a little different direction, we just spent 3 days together at the Sanders Institute gathering. Had 50 people from high-level political leaders, Newsom, Rouhani, Jayapal, and so forth, and Karen Bass, down to
it's not up and down, but
young electeds. And then also like there was a couple people in jeans and t-shirt, rolled up shirts that were out in the desert, putting up housing for houseless people out there. And I must say it was very invigorating and lots of fun. But I've been invigorated in the past about efforts to tackle homelessness, which has been with us for a long time. Do you see us making any progress on the 70,000 people who live on the streets of Los Angeles County?
The only thing I would say that felt like progress clearly to me was what I saw as the constitutive difference between the posture of Mayor Karen Bass and the outgoing Garcetti administration. I thought that she is signing up to the idea that she's going to try different things. How much will she be willing to challenge the status quo ante in Southern California is so powerful because it's not only, the real estate lobby, the developers, and all of their money, which is astronomical in Southern California, sort of de facto alliance with the building trades. It's also individual homeowners. But at the same time, Southern Californians are committed en masse in polling to want to solve the homeless crisis. And so, there are different strategies and measures that can be taken at the local level because, for instance, there's a lot of unoccupied property here. Maybe are there enough unoccupied domiciles to house everybody? Yes. There certainly are enough unoccupied buildings because of offices, right? And then there's a load of NIMBYism, though. And how can a mayor overcome it? I think she's willing to really. I don't think she wants to be seen as just leaving it where it stands when she got there. I think she wants to make real progress. I myself do think that we, as somebody who's involved now overseeing a national federal PAC, we have to be more forceful in demanding the federal government play a large role. And there was also from a state assembly person, Alex Lee, a very strong presentation on social housing. And of course, I think ultimately at the end of the day, the building of more housing not being driven by market forces is really going to have to come into play here. And how does that come into play with all the NIMBYism that exists? Where would the housing go? I think we as a political movement have to highlight the necessity, and the progressives have not done this adequately. In 2016, I think it was 2016, but I think 2022, when there were negotiations with the mainstream of the Democratic Party over the National Democratic Party platform, healthcare is a human right. Everybody was going to sign off on that. They're just going to buy that. Even just the slogan "housing is a human right" shot down instantly by the moderates.
Yeah.
So even on that level, progressives need to elevate that message and then look for the solutions. I have my own ideas, particularly about the role of the federal government, the necessity of the role of the federal government in funding specifically, social housing. But if that's not on the table, then I think we have to get behind and push Karen Bass to do what I think she wants to do. And I think there's real promise there. I thought that Garcetti was a closed door to really push on it and get something done. Yeah.
Well, one thing that gives me hope, whenever I look at a situation that almost looks like it's a problem that's impenetrable, no way to overcome the problem, I think about where I was, let's say 30 years ago, when I could walk down any street, go into any restaurant, go into any building and see somebody smoking a cigarette, and I'd be one of those people smoking a cigarette. And we changed the cultural landscape. There was a concerted, intentional effort to get rid of smoking the way that we were smoking back then, because it was harming society. And I think that we can do the same thing with these deep-pocketed developers. We can change the way that we feel about that as a nation. It's like turning the Titanic, but it has been done. We did the same thing with seatbelts in cars. I'm pretty sure I'm older than you, Alan, but I do remember sitting in the car with my parents while both of my dad is driving, my mom is sitting. We're all in the car. Nobody has on a seatbelt, and both the parents are smoking. That's how I grew up, and it was perfectly acceptable. It was not like socially unacceptable to see two little kids in the back, no seatbelts, inhaling secondhand smoke. But we've changed that. We've changed the culture, and we can do it here too, I believe.
I wanted to point out one thing, one extreme example of NIMBYism that was pointed out by the attorney Mark Rosenbaum and a veteran, Rob Reynolds. And they talked about there's 250 veterans, disabled veterans, mentally hurt, physically hurt, homeless, living on the sidewalks outside the West LA Veterans Administration. And they've done so for years, really. And the Veterans Administration doesn't do anything for them, keeps them out, gives them the runaround. At the same time, across the street, they have those grounds where they have all kinds of empty buildings. All they'd have to do is fix the screens and move them in. And yet, because that community doesn't want, they want the property that was deeded to the veterans. They want it for better purposes, upscale purposes, penthouses and so forth. And I know Mark Rosenbaum is in the courts to fight that, but he's been in there before, and it's gone on a long time. It was just sad I knew the story, but it was sad to hear it told by a veteran who'd actually been living on the sidewalks. And I don't know.
So we're gonna follow this case
If
because we want to
we
get
don't have the heart to deal with that, it's hard to know how we have the heart to deal with the other 69,975 people.
And look, for people who don't maybe know the area in Los Angeles or listening outside of Los Angeles Metro, the chances of a Republican winning anything in that area is next to nothing. So this gives you a sense of the divide between an honest progressive left element of the Democratic Party and the neoliberal, because that is, of course, a inhumane outrage. What you're describing, those buildings should be occupied by those veterans, and every veteran. Look, I'm not the greatest fan of the U.S. military, but in no way, shape, or form do I blame the veterans for anything to do with U.S. foreign policy. And every person who has served in that capacity deserves to be housed. All human beings deserve to be housed. But just the naked, blatant contradiction of the hollow lip service that can be given to all veterans, and then to see the rates of homelessness in the housed among the veterans. It's been going on for decades. I remember seeing it when I was much younger in San Francisco. I was on a BART platform, and these two guys across the BART were just yelling back and forth, "Oh, what platoon were you in?" Because they could recognize that they had been in Vietnam together, and they knew as they were sleeping out on the streets of Vietnam. So it was such a pronounced phenomenon back then. Hey, I want to just say I have three already points I wanted to pick up on. One is, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight all of the work for renters' rights and for rent control, particularly in California, where it's basically been outlawed since 1995. It exists in pockets, but the idea is always to try to get rid of it, and then it can't come back where they can knock it out. And so the effort to reverse Costa-Hawkins on a proposition, I think we should really make a more concerted effort to win that. Governor Newsom, Democrat again, opposes rent control. Guys, the same party that I'm in. And so to that point, I should in this interview say what I always say. After 2016, I think there are three political formations vying for national power within a two-party system. They're the Trumpian reactionary Republicans, their political ascendancy really just is a prescription for social chaos and division within the society and exacerbated divisions. And then there's the neoliberal center, which, in many respects, we have to have a painful alliance with, those of us on the progressive left, to defeat the fascists. Again, leaving aside the issues particular around Israel and Gaza, which were so pronounced, so heartbreaking, and so terrible. But then there's the progressive left. And the progressive left are the political formation, the sole political formation that are trying to rectify all of these ills that add up to the reasons why, when you ask Americans, how do you feel about the direction of our society? They're like, no, we're off the rails here across the board. And we're the only political formation with solutions to these problems when they go through their checklist of problems. And we know that when Biden is out there sort of smugly saying that the economy is going great, people are like, what is he talking about? My kids are sleeping on the couch. They have no prospects of ever owning a home, which, they're hardworking, well-intentioned people. And we all thought that was part of the American. Look at all these individual suburban houses. Well, they're now all owned by banks, and they're rented out, and their valuations put them way out of the reach of anybody making a middle-class society in most major metropolitan areas, population centers. Thirdly, I want to go back to the point of media, though. Sharon, look, I can't praise LA Progressive enough. And, there have been a bunch of ostensibly left media projects, some of them quite good, some of them less so. And you can sort of see them fall into the grabbing for trying to get audience, and they get into these little internecine wars, and eventually people turn off to them because they all just seem to be about sort of character-driven infights and things like this, and ego elevations and stuff. You all do a really serious project of bringing important information forward, and that's the kind of stuff that we really need to elevate. And of course, all your stuff is very engaging as well, so there's that too. But the problems with the media that you highlight are profound, and I don't think the fact of the internet and its openness is the solution. We have to make a concerted effort to elevate and lift up the projects in the media that really do reflect the kind of information that needs to be shared in the society that's going to make progress going forward.
Right. Well, thank you. With those words, we're going to have to conclude because we don't want to make this thing too long.
Yeah.
Short attention spans. But Alan Minsky, we're so grateful that you spent these few minutes with us, and we'd like to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, and thank you. And look, I'll give this little pitch. People should check out Progressive Democrats of America at pdamerica.org. It's sign up for free. We are a grassroots driven national political organization looking for real, meaningful, progressive social change in the society. We love working with anybody out there going forward.
That's
Yeah.
right. PDA, we endorse it. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much for being with us.
It was good spending those 3 days with you, Alan.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Wait.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.